I started playing baseball when I was in the third grade. I was a catcher back then because nobody else wanted to catch when we went out on the playground. I played a lot of sandlot baseball until I was 12 years old. And we were playing a game behind a A&P store. Played in a vacant lot there. And I hit a ball that flew out into the street and bounced and hit a plate glass window on a sign painting company. And the guy came running out, and all the other kids took off, you know. And so I was just standing there looking, and he said, "Get down here." He said, "Get down here, I want to talk to you." And so I just stood there. And he said, "No, I'm not going to do anything. Just come down." So I went down there, and he said, "Did you hit that ball?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Well, do you play on any organized team?" And I said, No, I said, "I don't." He said, "Well, what position do you play?" I said, "Well, I'm a catcher." He said, "Do you want to play on a team?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." So he said, "Well, stay right here." So he went in and he got on the phone and he said, "Chuck, I found your catcher." But he said he's kind of small. He said he's kind of small, but he said he can really hit. So, so I heard the Chuck on the phone say, "Well, have him come down to the park on Monday, you know." So he came back out and he said, "You're going to play on a team." He said, "They have a summer high school league," and he said, "What grade are you in?" I said, "I'm only in the 7th grade." He said, "Well," he said, "I think you'll do all right." So anyway, he said, "Show up at the park at 8 o'clock on Monday," and he said, "You're going to play on a team." So the pitcher that was pitching was a big kid, could really whistle the ball in there. And I put on the equipment. I was only 5'2", and the chest protector went down below my knees, and I had to adjust the mask. And so the first pitch of the game, the batter hit this wicked high pop fly. So I threw off the mask and ran over near the other bench, and they had the bats all lined up there in a row. And I stepped on the first bat, and it was like going on a roller coaster, and then dove and caught the ball about 6 inches from the ground. So all these kids were yelling, you know, "What a catch, you know, what a catch, you know." Well, they weren't so kind later on when they were coming into the plate, because they always tried to knock me over. And after the first couple of games and taking a pretty good beating, this old guy took me to one side, and he says, "Listen to me." He said, "You got to teach these guys a lesson so they leave you alone." So he said, "There's nothing like an old-fashioned head tag." He said, "You might have to give up some outs," but he said, "Jump right on their chest and tag them in the head, you know." Or he said, "If you know they're going to hit you, you get down real low, and just as they're going to hit you, you stand up." And he said, "You'll get thrown backwards." He said, "But they'll do a loop to the loop and land on their heads." And he said, "They won't forget that." And so he said, you're going to get into a lot of fights too. But he said, after a while, they'll leave you alone, you know. And so sure enough, I said, I went at it, and, I did get into some fights, but after a while they left me alone. And then I could concentrate on, you know, calling for pitch outs and throwing to second and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and so, anyway, I batted over 400. The first couple of games, I had trouble hitting the pitchers. First of all, I was really short, and so I went to the library and I got to reading about Ty Cobb, who was left-handed, okay? I was right-handed. And he used to choke up on the bat. And so he would hold the bat like this, and he could either bunt or place hit, and he drove them nuts. And so I did the same thing, and I batted over 400 and made the all-star team. They picked an all-star team, and we played different towns. And so I can remember when we played the first playoff game, and I started, and one of the kids says, "How come that little SHIT is starting?" And so Chuck Stone, who ran the league, said, "Because he earned it, that's why." So anyway, after that, I played a couple more seasons as catcher. Then I started playing in the infield, and I pitched a few games. And, so I had a pretty good mentor who was a player who was a semi-pro player who had played for the old Cincinnati Reds, and he was a pitcher. And he was in his 50s, and he was pitching in an industrial league. And he showed me, all of his pitches, finger balls, and fingernail balls, and fork balls, and palm balls, and everything you could think of, And his arm was pretty well shot, and so his changeup was a fastball, So he'd throw all kinds of junk to these young kids, and they'd swing from the heels and miss, and he'd laugh like hell, And the more he laughed, the more irritated they got, and the more frustrated, But he showed me took me to the park one day, and he said, "We're not going to do anything. I'm just going to explain stuff to you, So he said, first of all, he said, "You see these baselines?" And he said, in a lot of parks, he said the groundskeepers will taper the soil around the baseline, either so that a bunt will go foul or it will stay fair if they have players on their team that are good bunters, And so what I used to do when I was playing, organized baseball was, before the game started, I would take a baseball and I'd go out looking toward third base and roll the ball up to see where it went, or the same thing with the first baseline. So everybody thought I was nuts, but I used to bunt a lot, and so that was important. So anyway, when I was 14, we moved to West Warren, Mass, and there I played in the Connie Mack League, which was for 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And I didn't play high school ball. I got into a row with a coach because I was trying out for third base, and I was actually very good at it. And So there was a kid who had played there 3 seasons before, and so he put him in the position instead of me. So I got teed off and just quit, you know. So I didn't play high school ball until I was a junior in high school, and I had run the bases in 12 seconds, believe it or not, going around the bases. And that's running an 100-yard dash under 10 seconds. And so going down the first base line, I could run, you know, run like heck. And so my coach said to me, he said, "Where the hell did you learn how to run like that?" I said, "Well," I said, "you won't believe this." But I said, when I lived in Athol, I said, I used to race cars from one telephone pole to the other. And I said, I never lost. He said, "You're kidding me." I said, "No." I said, one night, a car skidded sideways, and I had to jump over the line. But I said, I never lost a race. He said, well, I said, "No wonder you can run down the first base line, you know." And so one of my advocates when I played in high school was a guy who was a bread man. He used to deliver bread door to door into small stores and stuff like that. And he had been a classmate of Walt Dropo and they were from Moose Up, Connecticut. They went to Plainfield High School. And this guy's name was Jerry Dubois, but he talked about Dropo so much that we used to call him Dropo, you know. And he talked about Walt Dropo fading back in football, and they would put Jerry in and for a special play. And Dropo would throw the ball as far as he could and as high as he could, and Dubois would run like hell and get under it and score a touchdown, you know. Walt Dropo eventually played for the Red Sox, and he was a star at UConn, and so were his two brothers. They were Serbian people, and their father worked in the mills down around Plainfield, Connecticut. So I got to know a lot about, you know, Walt Dropo. When Dropo broke in with the Red Sox, he was Rookie of the Year. Played first base. He played 13 years in the majors. And as part of a trade to Detroit, he went along with Johnny Pesky and 3 other players, and in exchange they got Vic Wirtz and several others. So that ended his career with the Red Sox, you know. But I saw Walt Dropo play at Fenway, and so I knew quite a bit about the Dropos. Walt Dropo was 6'5" and weighed 245, big guy. And the Chicago Bears wanted him to play football for them. And a minor league team wanted to sign him up, but he waited and tried out for the Red Sox and made the Red Sox. So anyway, I tried out for the Cleveland Indians when I was 18, and that didn't go very well. The guy that I rode with was our second baseman, and we were late for the game. We ran out of gas on the way there, and so when I got there, all the positions were filled, you know, so I waited, and finally I moved in at shortstop and tried that. I really wanted to try third base, but there was a guy there who just hogged the whole position, and never got to play there, you know. So they put us way out in the outfield, and so the coach says, "This is what I want you to do. I'm going to hit you a fly ball." He said, "You catch the ball, go back on your rear leg," and he said, "Throw the ball to the plate on 2 nice hops." And so anyway, I caught the ball, threw it in on a line, 2 nice hops to the plate. He said, "That's good, but not good enough." I said, "You blah, blah." He said, "What'd you say?" So I said, blah, blah, you know. He said, "I thought you said that." And I said, "There's not a major league park where I'd have to throw a ball that far." And he looked at me and he said, "You're right." But that didn't pan out at all. And so anyway, I played semi-pro baseball for a while after that. I played for Young Men's Polish Association in Three Rivers, and I pitched there and played the infield and outfield. And, but it was interesting. I was pitching there, and I told the catcher, I said, "If they get a man on third base late in the game, I'm going to throw at the batter." I said, "I won't hit him, but I'm going to throw at him." I said, "He'll get out of the way, you know." And so, sure enough, in the 7th inning, they get a runner on third. And batter turns around. He's going to squeeze him in with a bunt. I threw at him. He threw the bat up in the air and jumped out of the way. And the runner was out by 20 feet. And so after the game, the umpire came up to me and he said, "Anybody that would throw a ball at a man like that has got to be crazy." I said, "Let's get something straight." I said, "The runner didn't score, did he?" You know, but anyway, when I played for the Young Men's Polish Association, we used to use signals. I'd get up the bat, and if there's a man on first, I'd pick up dirt with one hand or the other and throw it back down. And that would mean, "I'm going to cover you, you know, you steal." Or it would be, "I'm going to try and bunt for a hit, and you steal, you know." And so anyway, the way I did it is the first pitch that came in, I would swing from the heels and miss on purpose. And so I can remember this old Polish guy sitting in the stands, and I swung and missed. And so he yelled, "Put some ground on your hands, Frankie," you know. And so anyway, I wound up playing for the West Warren Wildcats. And they had a great team, actually, and when I went to play for them, they had a second baseman already, and so they put me in right field, and I batted second. I can remember that. And so eventually, this poor second baseman, I mean, he would fumble balls and everything else. And so finally, they took him out and they put me in his position. And so after a while, he quit and left, you know. I kind of felt sorry for him, but that's the way it goes, you know. But anyway, I batted in the high 300s there, and one season over 400. And I can remember later on, after I played minor league ball, I came back and played for the Wildcats again. And a friend of mine who was playing on the team with me was starting to pitch. And he walked the bases loaded with no hits or anything. And so the coach came out to second base and he said, "I heard you used to pitch, Francis." And I said, "Yeah," but I said, "I really don't want to." And he said, "Well," he said, "I want to put you in here to, he said, we're in the playoffs. He said, we got to win these games. So anyway, I said, well, okay. So then my friend switched and he took second and I pitched. So anyway, between the two of us, we pitched a no-hitter. And one of the pitches that I had seen was I was in the diner in Athol, Massachusetts when I was a kid. And I came in and I had a bat and a glove. And I sat down at the counter and got a hot dog and some fries and a glass of milk. And there was an old guy there with a faded tan suit. It was pressed, it was clean, and he had on a tie and a straw hat, and so I got to talking to him, and he said, would you like me to show you a few pitches? And I said, sure, why not? So he showed me these different pitches, and he said, I have a secret pitch that I want to show you, he said, and don't you dare tell anybody about it. And so actually it was a two-fingered knuckleball, and you hold the ball like this, and if you want it to drop, you push out on these two fingers. So the ball will come wobbling into the batter and drop right out of sight, you know. And so I used that when I pitched instead of a changeup, you know. And you can throw it as a knuckle curve, as a slider. You can throw it as an underhand pitch, and it will rise. Looks like a butterfly coming out of the grass, you know, but it would drive them nuts, you know. So anyway, later on in that season, I pitched 3 straight games for the Wildcats, and we won the league that year. After the third game, my arm was hanging, you know. I wasn't sore, it was just tired, you know. And so I used the fastball as a changeup, you know, and I threw a lot of sinkers and curves, and so anyway. Well, I was recruited to go into what was the Northern League then. There had been a number of Northern Leagues around, and they were unaffiliated with any major league team. There still is a Northern League, but it's in the Middle West, and ours was in New England, and you know, so I played for a team in Worcester, and I batted .446 the first half of the season. Stole all kinds of bases and made no errors. I was playing in the infield then, and so I went to a game at the midway mark in the season, and the manager says to me, "You're going to have to sit this one out, Francis." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm leading the league in hitting and no errors, stolen bases." He said, "I'll explain it to you later." So anyway, after the game, he says, "Okay," he said, "this is what it's about." He said, "We've sold your contract to the Detroit Tigers." And he said, so they're going to be in touch with you. They'll tell you what's going on. So playing in the Northern League, you didn't get much for money. I got $65 a month, and they would give you like $2.50 to buy food, like if you were at an away game, you know. At home, you had to pay for your own, you know. And if you were at an away game and you had to stay overnight, they'd put you in some dumpy hotel, you know, and it just, you're lucky if you slept through the whole night, you know. But anyway, I went into the New York Penn League and got more money. And the beauty of it was that I could still commute, and I could still hold my job because most of the games were night games or on the weekends, played a lot of double headers and stuff like that on the weekends. And so I played for Norwich, Connecticut, and they were in the Eastern Division of the New York Penn League. And so I played ball over several cities in New York and Pennsylvania and New England. So anyway, I batted .384 for the rest of that season at the New York Penn League, and so my manager said, he said, we're in the playoffs, and he said, I got to win this game. He said, if we win this game, he says, I'll get a promotion and more money. And he said, I heard you used to pitch. So I said to myself, here we go again, And so I said, okay, but I said, I don't want to pitch. I said, don't tell anybody that I want to pitch. I said, because I don't. I said, I want to play every game, So anyway, I pitched a one-hitter, And after the game, he says, you sure you don't want to pitch? I said, no, I don't want to pitch. I said, tell everybody I don't want to pitch. I said, I can't tell you in any uncertain terms, I don't want to pitch, He said, well, looks to me like you can play most anywhere. He said, and so he said, they're going to talk to you. He said, they want you to skip AA and go right to AAA. And that would be Toledo. And so anyway, they call me up. And so the scout says to me, if you went to Toledo, how much money would you want? So I said, $15,500. He said, oh, that's okay. So I said, that must mean that they think I'm okay, So I said, well, there's one hooker. I got to talk to my wife. And so he said, okay, I'll give you a week to make up your mind. And so I went home, talked to my wife, and she went ballistic. I'm not moving to Toledo, and I'm not moving to Detroit, period. That's it. And if you sign that contract, I'm going to divorce you, and you'll never see your kids again. And so things for a solid week were just horrendous, And so a week later, I call him up, and I said, I'm sorry. I said, I know that if I turn this down, it'll be the end of it, I said. He said, well, he said, you gotta think these things over. And he said, if your mate is not with you, he said, it's not going to be good anyway. So he said, I understand, So anyway, I went back to playing semi-pro ball. And so I played all over the place, all kinds of leagues. So when I was all done playing hardball, I got a call one night, and it was a guy from Ware on the phone, and he said, hi, he said, I run the Roosevelt Cafe, and he says, I have a team in the Ware League here. He said, we're going to have a fast pitch league this year. He said, and they tell me you played fast pitch before in softball and in the service. I did, yeah. So I said, well, what are you looking for? He said, well, we need a good infielder, he said. And he said, we heard about you. And so I said, well, okay. So I went to play for them. And I can remember Roberto was playing third base. And second batter of the of the game, he got up, and there was a runner on first, and then he hit a Texas leaguer over second, and I ran and I caught the ball in the first hop and whirled around and threw the ball to third base, and Robideau didn't see it coming, and it hit him in the chest. I thought I killed him, you know, and so after the inning was over, he says to me, God, he said, they warned me. They warned me about you. And I said, well, I said, you got to keep your eyes open. I said, otherwise you're going to get killed, you know. And so anyway, we were in the championship game, and the Ware Foundry had hired a professional softball pitcher. And so I got a couple of hits on him, and then in the late part of the game, the bases were loaded, and the pitcher tried to throw a fastball past me, and I connected with it and hit the ball off of the field. It cleared the pumping station by 50 feet, and we won the game. So the father of one of the players said to me later on, he said, Francis, he said, when he tried to pour that fastball past you, he said, I put my hands over my eyes, and he goes, oh no. And he said, you know, the goddamn ball is probably still going, you know. So anyway, I took my stepson down there, and he said, nobody could hit a ball that far. I said, well, I could. I said, this guy is throwing the ball 100 miles an hour. And I said, when I connected with it, it just went, you know. But so after that, after the Ware Foundry, who had always dominated the league there, they raised hell, and they went back to playing slow pitch softball. They asked me if I wanted to play for them at the Roosevelt, and I said, no, I'm not interested in that, you know. Well, it's interesting, you know, when I was 70 years old, we got a call at the house, and it was a guy from Ludlow, Mass. He said, we're organizing an over 40 league down here in baseball, and he said, we heard your father's a good player. So my daughter, my youngest daughter, who's very outspoken, and she says, are you out of your goddamn mind? Do you know how old my father is? He's 70 years old, you know? So I said, well, let me talk to the man. So I talked to him, and I said, you know, I'm 70. I said, if you could have somebody run the bases for me, I could play for you. But I said, I can't play for you. I said, you know, my days are all done, you know. But anyway, I thought I would go through some of the basic things in baseball, and you know, so I'm going to teach you all how to hit and stuff like that, you know. Anyway, the bases are 90 feet apart, okay? So if you run the bases, it's 360 feet. It's over 100 yards plus 20 yards, you know. So the plate is 17 inches wide and 17 inches deep. It used to be larger, and they shrunk it because it was too much of an advantage for pitchers, you know. Now, the pitching rubber is 60 feet 6 inches from the plate. This is 6 inches wide by 2 feet long. The rubber can be no more than 10 inches from the surrounding infield and the plate. It used to be higher, and so a good tall player had a lot of leverage, you know, and so the pitchers had the advantage. Now, in the major leagues, 250 feet is the minimum that the right field fence can be, and also the left field. Now, most of them today are more than that, so that's not a problem. Had I played for Detroit, it would have been 430 feet to deep center field. Now, down the first base line, there's an area which I always call no man's land. And on a bunt or a drop ball by the catcher, where the catcher has to throw to first base, the runner is not to run in that area, because if he does, he could be called for interference. So he's got to run to the outside, okay? We had a catcher who had the rule book all marked with a section of the rule book which outlawed that. And he would, on purpose, when a runner ran down the first baseline, he would throw the ball and hit him in the back, okay? And so the umpire on first would usually call the runner safe. And so he would call timeout, pull out the rule book, and show it to the plate umpire. So the umpire would go, runner is out, you know. So anyway, that's what the field is all about. Now, if you're running on the bases, what you should do, if it's an infield play, you run right past the base, and then don't turn this way, but come back to the base, okay? If you turn this way and they throw the ball to first, you could be called out, you know. So, and when you're running from one base to the other, you run down and you hit the inside corner of the base with your left foot. You throw your right leg over, okay? And then you're almost in a straight line with the second base. Same thing with the second to the third, you know. Otherwise, you know, you've seen players, you know, make a big circular run, and they're just eating up time, you know. So now, the official bat can't be more than 42 inches long. It's supposed to have an 18-inch handle and be no more than 2 3/4 inches in diameter. It has to be of one solid piece of solid wood. And usually made of white ash, it weighs between 32 and 38 ounces. Hillerich and Bradley is the official major league maker of baseball bats. Now, Babe Ruth used to use a 42-inch bat, you know, and so it takes a pretty strong guy to handle something like that. I used to use a 34-inch Al Kaline bat, you know, and when you hit a ball, it's the speed of the bat, not the weight of the bat, the speed of the bat that makes the ball go. I was playing a game one time at UMass between departments, and one of the players on our team was complaining. He kept hitting pop-ups. So I said to him, "How much does your bat weigh?" He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "How much does your bat weigh?" I said, "You know, it's the speed of the bat hitting the ball that makes it go." So I said, "Let me see the bat." So I picked up the bat. I said, "Get one that's lighter," you know. So he did. He hit 4 home runs. He said, "You know, no one ever told me about that." I said, "Well, you know," I said, "I've had some pretty good coaching, so, you know," I said, "I'm glad I could help you, you know." So on the various gloves, They, they call a catcher's mitt and a catcher's mitt a mitt instead of a glove. Same thing with a first baseman's mitt. The catcher's mitt can be no more than 38 inches in circumference, no more than 15.5 inches from top to bottom. The first baseman's mitt can be no longer than 12 inches from top to bottom, no more than 8 inches wide. The web cannot exceed 5 inches from top to bottom, nor more than 4 inches wide. Now, the pitcher's and fielder's gloves must measure no more than 12 inches long from base to top of the longest finger, and no more than 7 3/4 inches wide. Oh. Pitcher's gloves must be a solid color other than white or gray, because these colors could camouflage the ball. Major leagues license Wilson Team Sports to provide fielder's gloves. Various companies make catchers and first baseman's mitts. The baseball rules state that uniforms on a team are to be identical. No fashion statements allowed. Licensed manufacturer of caps is the New Era Cap Company. Various companies make uniforms. Now the baseball can have a circumference of between 9 and 9.25 inches. And that's the distance around the ball. And not weigh more than 5 to 5.25 ounces. It has a covering consisted of 2 pieces of horsehide or cowhide, each of a figure 8 shape. And these are stitched together with red thread. And they have the ball has a cork core surrounded by 2 layers of rubber and wrapped in a special wool yarn. Rawlings is licensed to be the major leagues to provide baseballs. The home plate umpire will muddy the game ball with a special mixture to reduce slippage when the pitchers throw the balls. One of the biggest thrills I had was when I saw Connie Mack and the Philadelphia Athletics play at Fenway Park. Connie Mack was a very religious guy. He was a Knights of Columbus member for years, and he didn't drink. And he didn't want his players to drink, although he did have Rube Waddell, a star pitcher, playing for him. And Rube got so out of line after a while, and his drinking, took over his whole personality. And so the fellow team members got after Connie Mack and asked him to trade Waddell, which he did, So anyway, Connie Mack came up with a code of conduct which he wanted all of his players to follow. And it said, the first one is, I will always play the game to the best of my ability. I will always play to win, but if I lose, I will not look for excuses to detract from my opponent's victory. 3, I will never take an unfair advantage in order to win. And number 4, I will always abide by the rules of the game on the diamond and off. And 5, I will always conduct myself as a true sportsman on and off the field. 6, I will always strive for the good of the entire team rather than my glory. 7, I will never gloat in victory or pity myself in defeat. 8, I will do my utmost to keep myself clean, physically, mentally, and morally. And number 9, I will always judge a teammate or an opponent as an individual and never on the basis of race or religion. So Connie Mack lived to be 93 years old, and over the history of Philadelphia athletics, which started in 1901, Connie almost went bankrupt 3 different times. And finally, in the end, he wound up having to sell the team for $1.6 million to a group from Kansas City. Okay, so he died at age 93 at his daughter's house after having fallen and broken his hip, and so he was bound to a wheelchair. But at the tail end, he was slipping, and he was calling for people to go into the games who were no longer there, you know, and so one of his sons stepped forward and took over the team, and Connie wound up as just a spectator, you know. But he was from East Brookfield, Massachusetts, and if you go there, right off of Route 9 near the center, there's a Connie Mack Lane, you know, named after him. He's not buried in East Brookfield. He's buried near Philadelphia, you know, and his funeral was at the church that he attended there, you know. So I saw him at Fenway, and he used to come to games with a 3-piece suit on. He had his own scorecard, you know. So that was probably as exciting as seeing some of the players, you know. And he had a right fielder who was an all-star right fielder, Elmer Vallow, who was left-handed. And Ted Williams laced one up against the right field fence. And Elmer jumped and had the ball in his glove. And one of the fans leaned over with a cup of beer and dumped it on Elmer's head, and he dropped the ball. And so this guy was yelling at him, you know, you're a bum and all that kind of stuff. Well, they didn't claim fan interference like they do today, you know, and so it counted as a double for Williams, you know. But anyway, I saw Joe DiMaggio and his brother Dom and Ted. They were standing right in front of where we were sitting. I was there with a bunch of the summer league kids, you know. And so Ted Williams liked kids, you know, and he didn't like baseball writers. He hated them. And I can remember Ted hitting a home run, and the fans would yell at him, "Tip your hat, Williams, tip your hat," and he refused to do that, you know. So this one game he went out to left field, and they were yelling at him, and he turned around and gave them the finger, you know. And so they littered the field with beer cans and bottles and stuff like that. It took about a half an hour to clean it up. And so later on, a couple innings later, he got up to bat again, and they were yelling at him, "Williams, tip your hat, tip your hat." And so he started at the ground with his finger, and he went, you know, like that. Never tipped his hat. The only time he tipped his hat was when they had a Ted Williams Day, celebrating his career. And at that event, he did finally tip his hat. So I used to listen to the Red Sox games religiously on the radio, uh, and I wrote him a letter and I said, "Dear Ted, would you send me an autographed picture of yourself?" I said, "My friends said you won't send one." But I said, "I bet part of my paper route money that you will, and so please do." So about a month went by, and I said, I guess they were right. So finally a letter came. So, so I opened up the letter, and it was from Ted Williams. So he says, "Dear Francis, encloses the photograph that you asked of me, and I won't ask you to give me any of your paper route money either." So he said, best ever, Ted Williams, you know. So I had that picture and the letter with a whole collection of baseball cards and glossy photos. And when I lived in Athol, I had a paper route there, and I got to know the man that processed the wire photos that came in over him. And so I had a deal with him that of the ones that he didn't use, I would have my pick, okay? And so I used to get all kinds of photographs of famous players. And one day I was telling my friends about Earl Torgerson, who played for the Boston Braves. And Earl was a very aggressive base runner. And one of his tricks was when he got on first base, he would pick up 2 handfuls of dirt. And when he headed to second, he would throw the dirt in the face of the infielder. And not only that, he would slide in and grab them by the glove wrist and shake it, and they would drop the ball, right? And so I told them about that. So they said, Francis, you're a liar. So anyway, one day, lo and behold, in the glossy photos that had been sent, over the wire photo, there was a picture of Earl Torgerson, and his hand was around the wrist of the infielder, and the ball was already dropping to the ground. So I brought that, and I showed him. I said, "See, So anyway, I saw, I saw so many ball players that in 1954, I was at Northwestern University, and I was at a summer program in journalism at Northwestern. And so I used to take the L into Chicago and go and see the Cubs play. And so one time, the Giants and Willie Mays were there, and of course Ernie Banks played for the Cubs. That's a later picture. That's not at the time when I was there, because the Giants hadn't moved there yet, But anyway, and you remember the famous catch? I don't know if you've seen the video of Willie Mays making that spectacular catch, and they call it the catch. And the man that actually hit that was Vic Wertz. And so people would talk to Vic Wertz after he retired, and they'd say, "What do you think about, Mays robbing you of that hit?" So Wertz says, "Well, I don't look at it that way." He said, "The fact that you identify me as the man that hit that ball," he said, "and in any other park," he said, "that would have been a home run." But he said, "It's better that way." He says, "That way he gets credit for the catch, and I get credit for the hit," So anyway, I have a picture here of the 1946 Red Sox team. And they won the pennant that season and went on to play the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series. And in the last game, Eno Slaughter scored all the way from first base and scored, and they won the game. And that's where the controversy came in about did Pesky hold the ball too long and all this stuff, you know. But Johnny Pesky and Dropo and a number of players were traded to Detroit, and Vic Wirtz came to play for the Red Sox. He played for them for three seasons, you know. But I can remember the Oakland A's coming to Fenway, and when Raleigh Fingers came in to relieve, you know, the announcer at Fenway announced, he said, "Now pitching for Oakland, Fingers," you know. So I thought that was kind of funny, you know. But anyway, so when I was growing up in Athol, I drove my neighbors crazy. I used to take a tennis ball and throw it up on the roof, and I call that roof ball, and I would practice catching pop flies. Or I'd throw the ball against the steps and field grounders, you know. And so one of the neighbors, I could hear her complaining to her husband. She said, "Will that goddamn kid ever stop?" So her husband says, "No, not until he gets to the majors," you know. So, you know, I used to take a bucket of stones and go to the back lot and hit stones with an old bat, you know, and so I did a lot of, you know, a lot of self-training actually, and you know, I'd be down at the ballpark all the time. If it snowed and then the snow melted, I'd be out there again, you know. So when I go around to different towns now, and I see all these ballparks that are empty, the kids are not there anymore, you know, and the only time they play is when they've got a supervision by a coach or something, you know, and so I think that's kind of sad, you know. But I've also go around and looked at some of the fields where I had played, you know, and most of them have been cut up into either 4 little league fields or softball diamonds. So all of that whole area, you know, of people playing in industrial leagues and so forth is pretty much gone, you know. TV has taken that away, you know, so.
We have to wrap up before we have questions, but could you talk to us about the baseball and the stitches?
Yeah.
You were telling me a brief story about the stitches and the baseball. Could you tell us that?
When I used to get up to bat, you know, the catchers are always trying to get you annoyed and get under your skin. And so I'd step out of the box and I'd look at the catcher and I'd say, "Well, you're so smart." I go, "How many stitches are there on a baseball?" And he'd go, "I don't know, 180? I go, "No, you're way off, you know." I said, "You need to find out how many there are." So in between innings, I'd look over and he'd be on the bench counting the stitches on the ball. So then he'd come back. A couple innings later, I'd get up to bat. So I'd say, "Okay, what'd you find out?" "Oh, I got 198. I said, "No, you're still wrong." I said, "You know, if you're going to be a catcher," I said, "you need to know how many stitches there are on a baseball." I said, "You know, the stitches are what makes the ball move when it's thrown." I said, "If you had a smooth ball, you know, you'd be lucky if you could have a curved ball or anything like that, you know." So anyway, he'd keep trying, and the only way you can count them is to mark it with a pen or something so you know where you started, you know. So there are actually 216 you know. Now, in the dead ball area that they call the early major leagues, the ball wasn't constructed the way that it is today, you know. And when we were kids playing sandlot baseball, we used to go around and collect bottles and turn them in and get the cash so we could buy a baseball to play a game. And so the cheapest one was $1.25, and that was filled with sawdust, and it would never last a whole game. And so we used to wrap it with electrician's tape before we even started so it would last. And even at that, at the tail end of the game, somebody'd bat the ball and the sawdust would be flying all over. And so for $1.75, you could get a better quality baseball. The best ones were like $2.50, and that was similar to this ball, you know. So when I first started catching, I didn't use equipment, and so I got wrapped in the head like 4 different times, you know. And so after I started catching in a formal league, you know, then you have all the equipment on it. But thank you.
We have to wrap up.
Okay.
But before we do, we have a little gift for you. We want to
Okay.
thank you very, very much for being here with the presentation.
Okay.
And this isn't an exact duplicate, but welcome to the team, Detroit Tigers. It's not the exact. Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you, audience, for being here also.